Today, we are tackling the Lad McConkey's tale of the tape. We're going to break down everything about him from start to finish. The University of Georgia standout wide receiver is a divisive topic in the Dynasty fantasy football space, but I'm going to tell you why you should be all in on drafting Lad McConkey in a few minutes here, so make sure you stick around to the end. Leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Now let's get into it. All right, Lad McConkey, wide receiver of the Georgia Bulldogs. He stands 5'11" and some change, about 6 foot if you round up, 186 pounds. This is his tale of the tape. He was born November 11th, 2001, which will make him about 22 and a half on the night of the draft. McConkey came from humble beginnings. A lot of the guys that we've talked about so far were 4- and 5-star recruits. But Lad McConkey was the number 187th ranked wide receiver in the 2020 recruiting class coming out of high school as a 3-star recruit from Chatsworth, Georgia. He came in day one to the Georgia Bulldogs and started as a 3-star wide receiver and saw playing time for a team that eventually won the national championship as a redshirt freshman in 2021. Ended up seeing 39 targets, 447 yards, and 5 touchdowns on the same field as the likes of Brock Bowers, Adonai Mitchell, George Pickens, all of whom were either higher recruits than him or maybe they were, upperclassmen like George Pickens. Super impressive for a 3-star recruit to do that after just his freshman redshirt season. And McConkey actually posted a very impressive 2.71 yards per route run as a redshirt freshman as well. So very efficient on a per route basis. In 2022, he built upon that season, posting 82 targets, 58 catches, 762 yards, and 7 touchdowns, and a 74.5 PFF receiving grade. Also added 134 yards and 2 touchdowns on as a runner on just 7 carries as well. So very efficient, do-it-all kind of weapon for the Georgia Bulldogs. 2023 was supposed to be like the massive eruption. It was supposed to be the breakout season for Lad McConkey. Adonai Mitchell transfers to Texas. Of course, George Pickens obviously no longer there, off to the NFL. It was basically just Lad McConkey and Brock Bowers. It was all set up for him. Unfortunately, he suffered a lower lumbar back strain in late August, which caused him to miss the first 4 games and ended up lingering all season. He also suffered a pedal ankle strain in November that caused him to miss 2 games and definitely affected him in more. The Alabama game in particular was one that I noticed he was affected in. Yet he still posted in 2023 3.26 yards per route run, which was 8th in the country, 4th among all 2024 eligible receivers behind only Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, and Marvin Harrison Jr. And he had an 81.3 PFF receiving grade, which was top 35 in the country. So again, only played a handful of games, 7 or 8 games this year, but 37 targets, 30 receptions, 483 yards, 16.1 yards per catch, and 2 touchdowns. We were robbed of the monster junior season, ironically, just like his former Georgia teammate. If you guys recall, in 2022, we didn't get to see that breakout season out of George Pickens outside of his freshman season. And he ended up, tearing his ACL going into his junior year and ended up coming back later on. So I don't know what it is with these Georgia Bulldogs. Their draft eligible season, they tend to get hurt. But when the production is muddied, we have to rely on per game stats with a guy like Lad McConkey. And of course, we have to rely on the tape with Lad McConkey. And it is damn good. His expected draft position in the NFL draft is a 1-2 turn pick. You guys can see his consensus rank is 36th overall. One of the most common draft eligible spots for him is the 33rd overall pick to the Carolina Panthers. He does have a lot of great connections in late round 1. The Bucs wide receiver coach, Brian McClendon, coached and recruited him to the University of Georgia. So 26 overall, I would say, is probably his ceiling for how high he could go. His Ravens offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, used to be the offensive coordinator of the Georgia Bulldogs. So he also coached him and could be in on Lad McConkey at pick 30 or 29, wherever the Ravens end up picking there. Kansas City Chiefs, Detroit Lions, Buffalo Bills, Carolina Panthers, New England Patriots, all picking between that 25 and 40 range. Definitely makes sense as potential landing spots for Lad McConkey. So let's get into the actual traits with Lad McConkey. Me and Danny broke down his all 22, and that is live on the site right now. So If you guys do want to see some of these traits in action, flockfantasy.com/FSE right now, link down below for McConkey's tail of the tape breakdown, Xavier Worthy's tape breakdown, Brian Thomas Jr.'s tape breakdown, Romo Dunze, Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison's all live on the site right now. We're hoping to have about 10 wide receivers by the time the draft gets done, and about 15, 20 overall players, including the top quarterbacks, running backs, and the top tight ends as well. So number one on this list in terms of fundamental traits for the wide receiver position that we're evaluating Ladd McConkey on is their ability to create separation and route running. It is the heaviest weighted trait in my grading system. Ladd McConkey's short area agility is the best in this class. Bar none, it's the best in this class. When you watch him, you can see that this guy is a natural separator. He ran a 97th percentile short shuttle and a 3-cone in addition to 4.39 speed. So it's not very often that you get a freakish short area separator that also has that kind of speed. And it reminds me a lot of Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers, some of the other guys that we've seen over the past few drafts that have had that combination. Their ability to marry their feet, their shoulders, their head, and their hips are outstanding, and that's what makes them great route runners. And with Ladd McConkey, man, he's just a route salesman, man. And I'm going to try and do my best Matthew McConaughey here because nobody, least of all defensive backs, knows whether Ladd McConkey is going up, down, or in fucking circles because that's the type of unpredictability he runs routes with. I cannot wait to see his reception perception profile drop. No doubt he crushed it in fantasy football. Think about the guys that we called elite route runners coming out of the draft. Let me know if any of these guys busted because to me, this is the most translatable trait to the NFL. It's why I'm always very high on route runners. I was high on Amon-Ra St. Brown. I was high on Jordan Addison, high on Chris Olave, high on Tank Dell, high on Zay Flowers, high on Jaden Reed, high on Josh Downs, high on Garrett Wilson. Route runners translate, just point blank period. And Ladd McConkey is probably one of the best in this class, if not the best in this class, especially short to intermediate separation. He is absolutely a magician in that area, and we broke that down in his tape breakdown. I can't really do it justice, but the way that this guy turns, I can almost hear the skirt sounds when he makes cuts on his routes, and he sets up defenders, he understands leverage, he knows exactly how to run routes like an NFL wide receiver, and it is a very, very big check mark in his production profile that he has there. So number two, fundamental trait, once you get open, you got to catch the ball and reliable hands for the most part. There is some concentration drops that I noticed with Ladd McConkey. He has to tighten up with a 7.8% career drop rate, but he's also open most of the time. So commanding targets, that usually happens. You usually have some drops when you're a target commanding wide receiver. I was very impressed with his career contested catch rate of 52.6%, considering, I mean, he's like 5'11 and some change, 186 pounds. His ability to finish through contact was definitely a little bit of a concern for me, but I was actually overall impressed given his size. It doesn't exactly scream that he's going to go up and get it, but I do think he's physical and tough enough at the catch point that he's not going to have every single pass that's contested broken up. Anytime he lost contested catch opportunities, he was simply outmatched or the DB made a really good play on the ball, which may be a slight concern for him in the NFL, but functional strength, generally speaking, is pretty solid. Definitely has some room to grow in that area, maybe get in the weight room in the NFL. But for the most part, I think he has very reliable hands and can finish through contact. Some work to do here, but overall a trait that he hits. So number three on this list in terms of fundamental traits, get open, catch the football, do something with it, and goodness, is he ever fun after the catch. I gave him a perfect grade in yards after catch because he is the perfect space receiver. Probably only Malik Neighbors is better in this class, in this area, maybe Xavier Worthy as well, given the speed that he has. You get this guy in a West Coast offense so that, many teams can run a horizontal offense with him, and a lot of teams do run offenses like this, and he could do some serious damage. I think about his potential landing spots. The way that Dave Canales runs an offense in Carolina makes a really good fit. Andy Reid, of course, in Kansas City makes a great fit. Joe Brady in Buffalo makes a good fit. These guys would have a field day with a yak threat like Ladd McConkey. He's straight line fast, like I said, 4.39 speed, like we saw at the Combine, reached 21.5 miles per hour in game, 97th percentile agility to make you miss, and he's surprisingly physical to break some tackles as well. When you look at his yards after catch numbers, I mean, it doesn't get any better than this. And I say that really, other than Malik Neighbors, nobody has yak numbers like this. On 30% of his catches in 2023, he forced a missed tackle. That is a running back number. It's not usually something you see out of wide receivers. 26% in 2022 when he had more of a sample size, more production. So it's very clear he's elusive. His career 6.6 yards after catch per reception is also an elite number. And if you're thinking, oh, he was probably given a lot of checkdowns, 5 average depth of target or something like that, his career ADOT's like over 12 yards. So it's not like he's getting all these short and intermediate targets all the time where he's boosting his yards after catch number. The craziest yak stat I can tell you is that he averaged 16.6 yards per carry on runs. So when he was given jet sweeps, when he was given any kind of carries, he had 12 of them over the course of his Georgia career, and he had 216 yards and 4 touchdowns on 12 career carries. So this dude is absolutely explosive. He can make you miss in space. He has the burners to be able to burn you down the field once he gets ahead of steam, and he's got a knack for finding green grass. So yards after catch ability, massive check mark in favor of Ladd McConkey. Get the ball in this guy's hands and watch him work. It's going to make him a very, very fun PPR option at the next level. Number 4 on this list is 3-level ability. So if everything sounds like he's like elite so far, this is where he is going to lose a little bit of marks for me. His downfield production just doesn't jump off the screen. He has only 7 deep targets in 2023, which was 19% of his total targets. So again, he is more of a short to intermediate threat, even though he can get downfield. That number was just 23% in 2022 as well. When you watch his downfield reps on tape, it's clear that he can do it. It just wasn't a huge part of his game at the University of Georgia. He has the speed, he has the route running chops to do it. And if you're thinking, oh, he's just this 7A dot guy like I talked about, his average depth of target was over 12 yards, especially in the last 2 seasons that we saw from him at the University of Georgia. And that's right where you want it to be. Usually alpha wide receiver ones are anywhere from 10 to 14 yards. So 12 yards right in the middle of where you need him to be. He can do it at all 3 levels, but I would imagine gobbling up short and intermediate targets with the occasional deep shot is going to be his role in the NFL, which again, we all play in PPR leagues. I absolutely love that for him. That's what Amon-Ra St. Brown does at such a high level. When you get to the athleticism portion of this, again, I think everybody's past the point with Ladd McConkey now where we're comparing him to like Julian Edelman and Wes Welker and Hunter Renfrow and Kyle Phillips, but there is some people out there not watching the tape or checking the numbers, so I will address that concern right now. Ladd McConkey posted a 9.32 relative athletic score. And again, keep in mind, he's undersized. So the fact that he's that athletic, given his undersized nature, is super important, right? 5'11 and a half, 186 pounds. He actually threw up 13 reps on the bench of 225, which is 40 pounds heavier than he actually weighs. 40-yard dash, 4.39. You stack up his numbers versus Garrett Wilson, and he's actually a better athlete. You look at that short shuttle and 3-cone time, that's a 98th percentile short shuttle time. He has the speed of Garrett Wilson. He has the explosiveness of Garrett Wilson. Again, stop comparing this guy to Hunter Renfrow. Stop comparing him to Kyle Phillips or Julian Edelman, because that's just, it's not an opinion anymore. It's a stone cold fact. He's the same size. He has better speed. He has better jumps and better agility than Garrett Wilson. So, and none of us were questioning Garrett Wilson's ability to play on the outside at the next level. So just because he doesn't necessarily look like an outside wide receiver physically, he has the athleticism to play on the outside. Don't let anybody tell you that he's just a slow white slot receiver like Julian Edelman or something, because he can do that. If you want him to do that, he can do it. It's just one part of his game. He's a very multifaceted wide receiver. Number 6 on this list in terms of fundamental traits is his production profile. And again, he has gotten a lot of praise from me so far in this video. This is easily the biggest knock on Ladd McConkey in my grading system. If you put Troy Franklin's production profile on Ladd McConkey, he would legitimately make that top 3 wide receiver tier a top 4 wide receiver tier, because in my opinion, his film is that good. It's top 4, top 5 in this class, but aside from a per route basis, it's really hard to point to a lot of production thresholds that we want to see as a fantasy football wide receiver, because his career high 16.7% target share in 2022 is not really good enough. He wasn't an early declare. He's going to be 22.5 on draft night. He never broke out in terms of commanding a 30% dominator rating of his offense. Again, he was competing with NFL talent, but he never really commanded that elite target share that you want to see. His best season yards per team pass attempt is just 1.55 yards. Any redeeming qualities that you pull from Ladd McConkey's profile come on a per route or a per target basis, because he was 5th highest in first downs per route run over his career. Career yards per route run in this class ranked 5th among all wide receivers at 2.54, top 4 in yards per route run in 2023 with 3.26, 81.1% catch rate in 2023, which was first in this class, 30% juke rate. Like I said, after the catch, he's very good. 4.19 yards per route run versus zone coverage specifically, which was second only to Malik Neighbors, and a 30.9% target share versus zone coverage was also third in this class. So again, you can pull per route, per target, per game numbers of Vlad McConkey and get yourself to a good production profile, but the overall body of work, because of the injury-riddled season in 2023, is a little bit murky. So again, that's where he loses the most marks for me, but generally speaking, there's context behind the numbers. You can get there in some facet or another, but it does affect his grade. Some of the subjective things that also factored into his grade for me was he has Georgia toughness, right? To play for the University of Georgia, to start as a redshirt freshman and a redshirt sophomore, albeit even if functional strength was a minor issue for him, he is very tough. He plays very physical. He blocked his ass off as a run blocker, and he also held his own against bigger defenders, and coaches will absolutely eat that shit up. He's a very smart player also. He graduated with a finance degree. You don't average over 4 yards per route run against zone coverage without understanding leverage, without understanding open space, and whatever coverages you're seeing very, very well. So smart IQ is something that is also translatable to the NFL level, and I do think Vlad McConkey's very good in this area. He also has great body control as a route runner. He's very calculated. I think he understands how to set up defenders, which plays into that football IQ as well. So again, he's checking a lot of boxes. The one box that he doesn't really check, though, is the predictability of his production profile, because on paper, it looks like this guy's a bad prospect, but when you add context to the numbers and you look at the film, he looks like a much better prospect as a result. So my final grade on Vlad McConkey is 83.5 out of 100. He ranks currently right behind Xavier Worthy as my wide receiver 5 in this class, but just ahead of Brian Thomas Jr., who is my wide receiver 6. So all these guys are very close together within like 1 or 2 grading spots of each other. His grade is actually precisely the same grade I had on Zay Flowers last year and Chris Olave in 2022. So if you're wondering where would Vlad McConkey have stacked up with last year's class, he would have been my wide receiver 3 or tied for it with Zay Flowers, just behind Jordan Addison and JSN. Biggest strengths include athleticism, route running, speed, yak dominance, reliable hands, football IQ, and toughness, plus those per route efficiencies and the context that profile comes to paints him in a better light than his raw box score scouting would tell you. But his biggest weaknesses, of course, is he obviously misses the mark analytically across the board for breakout age, for dominator rating, target share, all very important metrics. He also struggled a little bit versus press coverage on the outside. Functional strength at the catch point, definitely something. Maybe get him in the weight room, add 5 to 10 pounds. It should help him in both areas. Downfield usage was lacking at times. And of course, the injuries that he suffered his final season need to be taken into account as well. My pro comparison for Vlad McConkey is actually Golden Tate. I think he reminds me a lot of the former Seahawks and Lions receiver who was a reliable Z receiver who could play in the slot, who could play at X at sometimes. For many years in the NFL, he had multiple top 15 fantasy seasons with the Seahawks and with the Detroit Lions. Very steady Eddie fantasy wide receiver 2 projection with wide receiver 1 upside in the right landing spot. To me, the ceiling here is a more athletic version of Amon-Ra St. Brown, or potentially a similar projection to what we had with Jackson Smith and Jigba last year. I think that Vlad McConkey is a very similar type of player, how you want to use him, how he wants to be deployed at the NFL level. The ideal landing spot for me is a place where he can be an absolute target hog. So ideally, I actually want him to go to a landing spot that needs a number 1 wide receiver like Carolina, potentially long-term like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the New England Patriots, Arizona Cardinals, Los Angeles Chargers, the New York Giants, all landing spots that I don't really like for Adonai Mitchell, for example, but I do like for Vlad McConkey because I think he's very pro-ready. But again, the ideal landing spot for every one of these wide receiver prospects is, of course, going to the Kansas City Chiefs, going to the Dallas Cowboys, Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills. I really do like the idea, though, of if he's going to get a bad landing spot, going to like the New England Patriots and being Drake May's new number 1 wide receiver at 34 overall. I think that would cause him to slide in rookie drafts, and I would end up with a lot of shares of Vlad McConkey. I think he's a universal scheme fit. Use him all over the field at X, at Z, at slot, but Z and slot are probably his best deployments at the next level. In terms of rookie draft outlook, he is my wide receiver 33 among rookies and veteran wide receivers in Dynasty. I would feel comfortable taking him round 5 to round 7 in a startup draft in Superflex leagues. In terms of rookie draft wise, I have him in a tier with Xavier Worthy and Brian Thomas Jr. in that 109 to 111 range. So with those 3 guys, just throw them in a hat. Whoever gets the best draft capital and landing spot is the guy that I would probably go with. I have Worthy right now at 109, McConkey at 110, and Thomas at 111 from a pure talent standpoint. But of course, that will change post-draft potentially